This is a Fox News Alert. I'm Brett Baer in Washington. Once considered a major contender for the Republican presidential nomination and the leader at one time in Iowa, Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker is pulling the plug on a campaign that has been circling the drain for some time now. Walker is about to make that announcement in Madison, Wisconsin. We are going to see that live here on Fox News Channel. A stunning drop for Governor Scott Walker. While we wait, senior political correspondent Mike Emanuel is here with details of a campaign that has changed trajectory. Mike?
Well, Brett, good evening. Scott Walker's campaign was off to a fast start, red hot in Iowa, and was the initial front runner. But Walker's poll numbers dropped, and with a crowded GOP field, fundraising became more and more difficult. In fact, the latest national poll from CNN ORC shows Walker has dropped below 1% support. Many conservatives respected Walker taking on public sector unions and winning, but most analysts viewed his debate performances as mediocre, and he was unable to give his campaign a shot in the arm. Now the hot names are all political outsiders. Dr. Ben Carson today is dealing with flagging support in the latest CNN ORC national poll, and a religious controversy somewhat of his own making. Donald Trump continues to lead with 24% support, but he's slipped 8 points. Carly Fiorina has jumped up to second place with 15% after being widely seen as the winner of last week's GOP debate. Dr. Carson has slipped to third with 14%. Senator Marco Rubio has jumped up to fourth with 11% after receiving positive reviews in the debate. And Jeb Bush rounds out the top five at 9%. Carson on Meet the Press was asked, should a president's faith matter, and should it matter to voters?
If it fits within the realm of America and consistent with the Constitution, no problem.
So do you believe that Islam is consistent with the Constitution?
No, I do not. I would not advocate that we put a Muslim in charge of this nation. I absolutely would not agree with that.
In Iowa Sunday, Senator Ted Cruz offered the analysis of a legal scholar.
Well, the Constitution provides that there should be no religious test for public office, and I'm a constitutionalist.
At the White House, Josh Earnest was also critical.
The fact is, this is not something that's consistent with the values of the vast majority of Americans. And, you know, ironically enough, I actually do think that the views articulated by Dr. Carson are entirely inconsistent with the Constitution that does actually guarantee the freedom of religion in this country.
A Republican rival noted there are approximately 3,500 Muslim Americans wearing the uniform of the U.S. military loyal to this country.
Looking live in Madison, Wisconsin, Governor Scott Walker.
Before I say anything about our campaign, I just want to say on behalf of Tanette, our family, we want to extend our sympathies to the family of Wisconsin Supreme Court Justice Patrick Crooks. We will let the Supreme Court make the official announcement like that, but we just want to pass on our prayers and our sympathy to him and his family, certainly his wife and his children, and all of his extended family. And we'll have more to comment on that in the days to come. As a kid, I was drawn to Ronald Reagan because he was a Republican and a conservative. But most of all, I admired him because of his eternal optimism in the American people. That thought came into my head when we were all standing on the stage at the Reagan Library last Wednesday. Ronald Reagan was good for America because he was an optimist. Sadly, the debate taking place in the Republican Party today is not focused on that optimistic view of America. Instead, it has drifted into personal attacks. In the end, I believe that the voters want to be for something and not against someone. Instead of talking about how bad things are, we want to hear how we can make them better for everyone. We need to get back to the basics of our party. We are a party that believes that people create jobs, not the government. And the best way to grow the economy is to get the government out of the way and build it from the ground up. We are a party that believes that the way to measure success in government is by how many people are no longer dependent on the government, because we ultimately believe in the dignity of work. We are the party that believes that a strong military leads to peace through strength, and that will protect our children and future generations, that good will ultimately triumph over evil. We are a party that believes in the American people, not the federal government. These ideas will help us win the election next fall, and more importantly, these ideas will make our country great again. To refocus the debate on these types of issues will require leadership. While I was sitting in church yesterday, the pastor's words reminded me that the Bible is full of stories about people who were called to be leaders in unusual ways. Today, I believe that I'm being called to lead by helping to clear the field in this race so that a positive, conservative message can rise to the top of the field. With this in mind, I will suspend my campaign immediately. I encourage other Republican presidential candidates to consider doing the same so that the voters can focus on a limited number of candidates who can offer a positive, conservative alternative to the current frontrunner. This is fundamentally important to the future of the party and, more importantly, to the future of our country. This is a difficult decision as so many wonderful people stepped up to support our campaign. Tonette and I are very thankful for the many outstanding volunteers and the excellent staff who helped us throughout the campaign. You all have been like family to us. And speaking of family, I want to personally thank my wife, Tonette, who has been a rock, as well as our two amazing sons, Matt and Alex. I thank my parents and my brother David and his family and all of our other family and friends for their love and support. Most of all, I want to thank God. I want to thank God for His abundant grace. Win or lose, it has always been more than enough. Thank you.
Governor Scott Walker suspending his campaign. That's the technical term, but he's essentially dropping out of this race. Not only that, he is encouraging other candidates to do the same. And like we saw with Governor Rick Perry from Texas, he also said there are too many personal attacks, not enough focus on what the GOP should be pushing for, which is positive solutions. Let's bring in our panel a little early, an expanded panel. Fox News senior political analyst Brit Hume, Juan Williams, columnist with The Hill, Nina Easton, columnist for Fortune magazine, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. Brit, someone who knows Scott Walker well, told me that rather than run on who he is, he ran as who he thought voters wanted him to be, particularly in Iowa. And that was his demise. He could never get traction, even from the start.
May well be the case, Brett. You know, this is a political cycle in which a lot of Republican voters are saying that they want their leaders to fight. You particularly hear it about the congressional leadership in Washington, that they don't fight. Well, here was a governor who really had fought in some tremendously bruising battles with the public employee unions in Wisconsin and prevailed several times. And yet that image of a real fighter was not the character that we saw on the stump, and particularly not the character we saw in the debates. And the man in the debate seemed retiring. He seemed not to have a lot to say. He didn't use his full time, particularly in the first debate. In the second debate, he didn't get called on very much. And when he did, he didn't make any kind of a splash. He needed to raise his game, not change his game, raise his game, I think. And he failed to do it, and the results are what you see.
Juan, it is striking, these poll numbers. The last time he was leading in Iowa, was in July. An NBC Marist poll had him leading the pack in Iowa. Then you have the CNN ORC poll that comes out, and he is less than 1% as of yesterday.
It's unbelievable. In some sense, remember, Iowa's a neighboring state. He had a reputation there. He thought that this was going to open alternatives for him, avenues for him, I should say, that weren't available to other candidates. And with Iowa, he would have momentum then and go on to New Hampshire. But what you've seen is a slippage that I think is tied into a couple of things. One is he's not an outsider, and this is the season of the outsider. Secondly, I don't think that he demonstrated that he could move beyond the union issue. Britt's exactly right. That was the reason for the candidacy, but then he had to demonstrate that he was more than it, that he had some national appeal, and he never could get traction on that front. So I think in the short run, if you're Governor Kasich of Ohio, in the short run, I think if you are one of the insiders as opposed to outsiders, you may have something to gain from his departure.
Well, in fact, already the co-chair, Walker co-chair in New Hampshire, has signed on to the Rubio campaign.
Yeah.
And you're starting to see at least some shift there.
I think both of you are right on why he couldn't get traction, but here's the thing, a lot of this is about money. And that's the precipitous reason for why he dropped out, is my understanding. He was broke, and his donors were going elsewhere, as you just indicated. This was a guy who didn't have the resources to stay in it, because there's a lot of candidates who are still in it, who are still insiders, who aren't getting traction, but have the bank account to stay in, the longevity. And so it shows you the importance in a race like this of having those resources.
Striking how he phrased it, though, Charles. Helping to clear the field is my patriotic duty.
Well, it was a remarkable statement. You rarely hear that candidate who bows out, it was my calling. Essentially, I'll give a translation here, to get out of the race, to consolidate the anti-Trump forces. That's what he was saying. He refers to the front runner. We all know who that is. But I find it interesting, he didn't blame Trump for him dropping out. I think he kind of knows why, and it alludes to what you said. He peaked early, and it's not just a process event. When he peaked early, he was way out ahead from that one great speech he made in Iowa. He then played safe. And when he got a difficult issue like subsidies for biofuels in Iowa, he fudged. He was able, I'm not going to talk about certain issues. He was sitting on a lead, which was a very early lead in one state, and it all hinged on Iowa. He knew, and he said that if he didn't win Iowa, he'd have to reconsider. When he knew that he disappeared in Iowa, it was over. But I think in a way, it's kind of patriotic. He thought, if I get out, well, he's dead broke anyway, like the Clintons after their time at the White House. But he realized if he gets out, the beginning of the winnowing of the field started early, because it's going to happen eventually. Do it now.
But, we're talking early, but this is, I want to put up that poll, NBC Marist poll. That's July. Britt, it's mid-September. I saw people on Twitter saying that he is the Tim Pawlenty of this cycle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a reasonable comparison. Pawlenty looked like a pretty hot ticket there for a while in the last time around, and he faded very quickly and pretty early, and he was out of the race. And obviously, Nina's right about the proximate cause being running out of money. That's true of nearly all candidates who drop out of races. They lose support. When they lose support, they lose money, and then they can't afford to campaign anymore, and they've already maybe in a little debt. And your creditors and suppliers are beginning to wonder, and unless you want to pile up more debt, you got to get out. So he did. It was interesting that in his comments he mentioned only trying to overtake the front runner in the Republican ranks. He never mentioned the incumbent president or the Democratic Party members that are trying to succeed him, which shows you sort of where we are now in all this. And I think it's a testament to the strange atmosphere in which we're operating. The two very successful, quite conservative governors are now off the, in a year when it was early thought that you wanted to be a governor to win. Now it turns out you don't want to be an office holder at all, at least based on current poll results. Mm-hmm. And this is a year in which qualifications are disqualifying. Very unusual.
Very. Panel, thank you. Up next, Hillary Clinton as a political outsider. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 31 in Albany, Georgia, with 28 years in prison for former peanut company executive Stuart Parnell following his conviction of knowingly shipping contaminated peanut butter and faking lab tests. The resulting salmonella outbreak left 9 people dead and more than 700 sick. Parnell could have received 800 years. Fox 2 in Detroit with the anticipated homecoming of former hostage Sam Farhan. He was one of 2 Americans released by Shiite Houthi rebels in Yemen. Farhan is a former Marine who worked in security. And this is a live look at Chicago from our affiliate, Fox 32. Sunny day there. The big story there tonight, more than 300 police officers moving from desk jobs to street patrols. It's the latest series of transfers aimed at getting more officers on the street to battle that city's spike in violent crime. The administrative jobs will be filled by lower-paid civilians. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back.